And welcome, I'm Benjamin Morgan, the Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia. And tonight we're going to be catching up with Shawn Kelly, who is President of AOPA, and he is also the founder and director of Paradise Seaplanes, a seaplane adventure flight business that operates on the Moreton River on the beautiful Sunshine Coast, and David Geers, who is the President of the Seaplane Pilots Association of Australia. The topic for this evening's panel discussion focuses on being swamped in bureaucracy, the challenges being faced by seaplane pilots and seaplane business operators, tourism operators throughout Australia. So without much more ado, we'll jump in here. Welcome, gentlemen, to tonight's broadcast.
Ben,
thank you very much.
So, David, just a very quick introduction for you. You're an IT and computer man of many decades, been involved in running business there, and became a private pilot through being introduced by a friend into aviation, and then went on to purchase your own seaplane, and then you buddied up with a whole bunch of pals with seaplanes themselves, and after a little bit of adventure flying around, you've now found yourself in the last 12 months as becoming the president of the Seaplane Pilots Association. No doubt a big responsibility and lots of work ahead.
Yes, it's a responsibility, and look, I'm looking forward to the challenge. I've been on the Seaplane Pilots Association for 10 years, and I've basically had my seaplane for another probably 10, 12 years now. I've certainly enjoyed flying around this great country, flying around Australia, and it was probably the highlight of my life. And next to getting married and all those other more important things, happy wife, happy life in the background there. But I've certainly enjoyed every part of the Seaplane Pilots Association, and the people involved in it are just fantastic. They're just a great bunch of people, and I've had just the best time, and it's time that I put a little bit more back into the association. That's given me a lot.
Well, it's a timely time to get involved in the leadership of the SPAA. There's lots going on across the industry, and there certainly is a big push going on right now for some significant reform to try and improve the outlook for general aviation and to get the broader general aviation community and industry and economy up and firing on all cylinders. So I'm going to look forward to unpacking a bit of this with you through tonight's program. Shawn, you probably don't need a great deal of introduction, but just very quickly, you are the president of AOPA Australia and my boss. I'll try and behave. And you come to that's probably hard to do, but you come to AOPA with a significant amount of aviation experience, and being a pilot and a flight instructor in the United States, you actually owned and operate a flight training school in the USA, yes. And of course moving to Australia, setting up a fantastic seaplane adventure flight business up on the Sunshine Coast there on the Moreton River with that beautiful Wilga. I'm very jealous. And so you have a great depth of experience, a broad range of experience. And tonight we're going to learn a little bit more about your business and some of the challenges that as a seaplane operator you faced in dealing with bureaucracy, and how that is actually creating a real opportunity loss, not only for the aviation industry, but for the community where you provide your products and services.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly has been a challenge. It's been a challenge since the very beginning, and I've had a lot of help to get through it. In fact, that was how I met David to begin with. David was really instrumental in helping me learn about, sort of find my way through the whole seaplane thing when I first became involved with it. So, David, thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.
Well, Shawn, maybe the best place to start is let's start with you establishing Paradise Seaplanes. And I guess if we can quickly walk through maybe some of the significant challenges you faced and some of the hurdles that you really felt created unnecessary obstacles and expenses for you. And then we'd really like to learn tonight a little bit about some of the challenges you're having in trying to work with local council and some of those access challenges which are now holding your business and many other seaplane businesses across Australia in various locations back. So we'll hand over to you, and we'll let you have the floor.
Well, I think the first thing is that good news for our friends at CASA. We're not going to be strictly concentrating on CASA. Certainly there were some challenges in the beginning when we were first trying to get the airplane on floats and in the air. The first challenge that I found was that once we had the airplane on floats and we did everything with appropriate STCs and engineering orders and everything as required. We went to put the airplane into the water, and my plan was to launch the airplane from a trailer because that's how it's done. If you look all across the United States and Canada, pretty much all seaplanes, all float planes, go back and forth between skis and wheels and floats. And whenever they're put on floats, what they do is they put the airplane on a trailer or a dolly, and they tow it out to the runway, and down the runway you go, and you fly off from the dolly. So it's a pretty normal sort of operation. And that's what I was planning on doing. And again, coming as I do from the States, I still have a lot of those residual American thought processes. And as part of that, it never occurred to me that I would need some sort of special permission to be able to do that, because that's how it's done all around the world. It's industry best practice. There was nothing in the POH that said that I couldn't do it. And as we've discussed before, in the US, that's the rule. If there's nothing prohibiting you from doing something, either in the POH or the regulations or placards and that sort of thing installed on the aircraft, then you're welcome to go ahead and do it. So we had the airplane on floats. I was just about ready to launch it and put it in the water. And I got a call from CASA saying, we heard that this is what you're planning to do. And I said, well, yeah, that's right. And I was asked, is there a procedure in your flight manual for taking off from a dolly? And I said, well, no, but there's nothing in there that says that I can't. And I was told, well, if there isn't something in there that says you can, then you can't. So they said, you're going to have to get a procedure. I said, well, the problem is that the type certificate for the aircraft is owned by EADS, which is Airbus. And I said, the chance of Airbus providing me with a procedure is pretty much nil. And I was told, well, that's not that's not really our problem. It's your problem. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe I can contact the float manufacturer and get a procedure from them. So I did that, and they were kind enough to provide me a procedure for taking off. And I submitted that to CASA, and I was told, nope, that is not a procedure in your flight manual. It is not from the aircraft manufacturer, not good enough. I went, bloody hell. So I looked around and I thought, well, I'll show them that this is normal. So I sent them links to probably 50 different YouTube videos of float planes taking off in the US and Canada from trailers and dollies. And they went, yeah, that's nice. Not a procedure in your flight manual, not good enough. I showed them magazine articles going back 30, 40, 50 years, brand new de Havillands leaving the factory on straight floats taking off from dollies. And they went, yeah, no, not a procedure, not good enough. So I was really sort of stuck, and I was trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I get the airplane in the water? I've spent all this money getting the airplane, buying the airplane, getting it on floats. How do I get it in the water? So I thought, well, I think I'll just have to put it on a truck. So just about that time, I got a call from CASA again. They said, are you still planning to do this? I said, no, I give up. I surrender. They said, well, how are you going to get the airplane in the water? I said, well, I'm going to rent a flipping crane, pick it up, put the airplane on the back of a truck, drive it cross country through a bunch of paddocks, get another crane, pick it up and put it in the water. And they said, is there a procedure in your maintenance manual for lifting it with a crane? And I went,
it's diabolical.
You've got to be kidding. You've got to be kidding me.
I mean, Shawn, I'll jump in. I'll jump in at this point in time, and I know that there's going to be a lot to talk about. But I mean, it's almost hard to fathom. I mean, that none of this would really be new. And David, I mean, I can see there's a bit of a smile on your face there. I mean, whilst pilots who are operating off runways and are used to using their wheels for everything, might look at landing on a dolly or even taking off from a dolly as being a weird procedure. This stuff is just pretty much commonplace, and it's everyday maintenance and flying. And you see the videos on YouTube. I mean, I've seen literally hundreds of videos of seaplane operations in and around Alaska and Canada, and it just seems to be a real matter of fact, normal thing that they do.
Yeah, I agree. It struck me strange when I was talking to Shawn about this years ago, but actually something that popped into my mind, and it's a bit of a cynical thing. all these videos you sent to CASA, was there any video that you saw of somebody getting it wrong, taking it off on a dolly? Because I've never seen, I've never, you know, I always watch them and I think, oh, this is going to be one of these, you know, like dash cam video things where it's all going to go wrong. And every time I've ever watched one,
and they don't.
I think, yeah, what's going to go wrong? But it all just seems to take off. And
so Shawn, were you surprised? Were you surprised, Shawn?
Sorry.
Obviously, in the interactions you're having with CASA, and I want to just labour on this point a little bit because I think there's some really important learnings in this one issue. In that this is obviously a challenge that you were facing that was really stopping the business kind of getting to a position where you can get started. It would have been an outcome where if it had just been facilitated, it would have made life so much easier. And I imagine you would have saved a significant amount of money being able to just facilitate that aircraft to the water. And I've seen your operations and I've seen how you operate. I mean, you're very meticulous with these types of things. It's not like you're a cowboy operator of any form. I mean, it seems quite disappointing that I guess the initial attitude with this is not one of, okay, here's a challenge and we need to solve this. Let's find a way to get this done. Instead, it's no, you can't do this.
Well, and I think more even than monetary effect, I think the biggest effect was on my end, sort of almost panic, because I had gone into debt to buy the airplane and to get it put on floats, and this was my new business. This was how I was going to earn a living, and all of a sudden I was basically completely prohibited from getting my airplane into the water. You know, and it really was almost a panic at that point, because what do? You know, I mean, I would then have to spend a lot of money to get the plane taken back off of floats, put it back on wheels, sell the airplane, try to sell the floats, and you know, I mean, that would have been a significant financial loss for me. But the biggest problem was just the stress.
So you obviously navigate the trailer issue. The next issue now is they hit you and say, hey, if you plan on moving this aeroplane, exactly how are you going to lift it? Is there a lifting procedure in the manual?
Yeah, and again, there wasn't. And so that was yet another roadblock. You're not going to be able to lift the airplane and put it in the water unless you have a procedure in your maintenance manual, which there wasn't one. And so at that point, I was talking to a friend of mine that flew World War II airplanes, and I said, how do you guys even fly those things? Because I don't know if either of you has ever seen the flight manual or the pilot's operating handbook for a 1940s vintage aircraft, but it's usually a couple of typewritten pages of stuff that you can't do, and that's it. There are no procedures. It's just don't exceed this, don't do this, don't do that. I said, how are you even able to operate the aircraft? And he said, we're not under CASA, we're under Shorebirds. And I said, well, tell me about that. He says, well, you know, we're under Shorebirds, so we've got our own procedures and policies and that sort of thing. And I said, well, if I was in Shorebirds, could I come up with a solution to this? He says, oh yeah. He says, you know, from what you've told me, this is a pretty standard procedure around the world. He said, just write a procedure. We've got a committee. The committee can review the procedure, and if they approve it, you're good to go. I said, so if Shorebirds approves my procedure, I'll be legal to take off from a dolly or a trailer. They said, yeah, that's right. I said, fantastic. How do I get to be in Shorebirds? He says, well,
hallelujah.
Yeah. I said, you know, this airplane actually was in Shorebirds when I bought it, and I had the people I bought it from put it into the normal category because I thought that was the way to go. He says, oh no. He says, we'll put it back in Shorebirds, and we'll write your procedure, and away you go, which we did. And that was basically how I got into being part of Shorebirds. And g'day, Lorraine. Willie is fine.
So Shawn, obviously, if you'd followed CASA, if that meeting, in order to understand that there was a avenue for you to exit CASA's system and to work through that self-administration, if you had followed CASA's thinking, you quite possibly would have ended up spending tens of thousands of dollars working around to provide solutions to these challenges, probably in a fairly
No,
cumbersome way. I mean, how would you have navigated it?
there were no workarounds. That was basically a dead end. If I hadn't had the opportunity to go into Warbirds, that would have been the end of it, because there wasn't any way to get the airplane into the water.
David, I'll bounce back to you. I mean, obviously, I almost don't know what to say to it. I mean,
Well, I
you've
take
got
that
the
back.
aviation
I take that
safety
back.
regulator.
I take that back. I probably could have pulled the airplane apart and put it on a truck and trucked it. Well, no, I couldn't have, because I'd have to lift it with a crane to get it on the truck. So no, I couldn't.
So we've got an aviation safety regulator. I mean, it is really there. I mean, its principal purpose is to be a resource for industry, so that we can do things safely and we can do things, I guess, within the realm of being legal. I mean, does it frustrate you that seaplane businesses are facing these kinds of challenges and that we don't appear to have a system whereby the regulator is able to adequately respond to these challenges to assist industry? I mean, are these roadblocks real impediments to stopping businesses getting involved?
Well, I would think they would be tremendous impediments. And again, it's definitely, there's definitely a feeling there of constantly trying to figure out how do we get around this rather than working with them. I would have been quite happy to be under CASA, and that was my original plan. I would have had to, spend the money to get an AOC, which I was prepared to do. But there have been other challenges as well. Once we were actually in the water, at one point I was told by CASA that we could not do 100-hourly inspections on the aircraft unless I put the airplane under shelter somewhere on a concrete pad to do the inspection. Well, there was no place that I could find that was where I could land in the water and then have access to a hangar with a concrete floor. And so I was told, well, I don't know what to tell you. That's just too bad, so sad. That's what's got to happen. And we finally got some sense out of them. And I said to them, I said, well, so if I take the airplane apart and ship it to a maintenance facility that's got a hangar and a concrete floor to do the 100-hourly, is that okay? Well, yeah, that's fine. So, and then in order to get the airplane back together, I've got to then ship it back to the river and then put it back together again. And can I do that? Yes, that's fine. So I was being told that it was okay to take the wings on and off the airplane so that we could ship it to a hangar to get it inspected, but I couldn't do the inspection at the river. I could take the wings off and put them back, but I couldn't inspect it. So
it just seems, Shawn, it seems absolutely crazy. David,
and again,
I'm going to jump in here to David. I can see David kind of, again, there's a little smile going on there as Shawn, you're walking through that. I mean, this has got to be incredibly frustrating for the Seaplane Pilots Association. Obviously, your members are all involved with these aircraft. I mean, how do you see this?
I don't really know. Look, we've got a bit of a saying, and it's not one that we're probably proud of, but it's a lot easier to get forgiveness than permission. And sometimes when we're landing in a waterway or something like that, so long as all the boxes are ticked, like there's power boats there, all that sort of stuff, we can quite often land there. But sometimes we find that, like Somerset Dam, power boats racing around there, but seaplanes are banned from Somerset Dam. So yes, there's a lot of things that get in the road, and sometimes it is easier to get forgiveness than permission. I feel for Shawn, because it's such a difficult thing to get permission. And look, I don't want to be shooting bullets at CASA, but I've been through a medical issue which was just nothing, and yes, I had a lot of trouble getting my license re-endorsed. You have a cardiologist say you're perfectly fine. You have your DAMI say you're perfectly fine to continue your operations, and then all of a sudden you have a bureaucrat at CASA saying, no, you've got a 6-month, rest. And I was, it was just a very small procedure. And then the following day, I'm right to fly basically again, but now I've got to have a 6-month holiday. So if I was a commercial pilot, and I need to point out now that I'm only a recreational pilot. I have my PPL license. I love flying my plane around, but I don't do it on a commercial basis. And I'd like to just also, on the committee, on the Seaplane Pilots Committee, we now have 5 commercial committee members. So that's really given the association a much better standing to represent a lot of the seaplane companies around Australia. And I really want to press that point, is that if there is a company that's having an issue, contact us and we'll try our very best to help them out.
Absolutely, David, a frustrating experience. And you've just said something there that, Shawn, I'm going to throw it back to you. It'll be very interesting. I'm sure our listeners and those that have been following these interviews would be interested in this question. And that is, obviously, you've run into these challenges with CASA. They're frustrating challenges, but they're not challenges that should be impossible to solve. Were the people that you were dealing with CASA, did they have any first-hand experience at these types of operations? Were they people that could fall back on that experience?
No, and I think that's probably a big part of the problem. I don't think that it was I don't think these things were done with malice. I think you're exactly right. I think it was just lack of experience in that type of aircraft and in these types of situations. So, there are not a lot of commercial seaplane operations in Australia. The majority of the commercial operators are operating amphibious aircraft, which makes obviously maintenance much easier. So it's just, I think it was it was an unusual situation for them, and I think they just didn't really know where to go with it. And I think that there also is I think that there is sort of a culture that it is not their job to try to help us. It's their job to try to tell us what to do, what the regulation is, rather than trying to figure out how do we achieve a safe outcome within that framework, which is, that's the only thing I've really ever wanted to do. As you said earlier, I'm definitely not a cowboy. I'm not someone who subscribes to the idea of asking permission or asking forgiveness rather than permission. I would much rather make sure that I'm doing everything by the book and right down the line as much as I possibly can. But occasionally you do have to be able to figure out the best way to be able to go forward with that.
So we've got the businesses up and running. Thankfully, Warbirds were able to facilitate getting that seaplane business really on its pontoons and running, for a little bit of seaplane vernacular. But we're on the floats, and you were off and running. And so, whilst the CASA regulation side is one that we can sit here probably for a 2-hour program, trust me, we've been doing it multiple days a week for weeks already. We could delve right into it. Quite often, it's not just the CASA regulatory burdens and bureaucracy that we're fighting as businesses. And so once you were up and running, you entered a whole new world of bureaucracy. Let's have a chat about that.
Yes. And just before we move on from that, can I just say that we did eventually come up, CASA actually did come up with a way to help solve the maintenance issue. So like I said, it took a little bit of time and effort, but I do want to just give credit where credit is due. We did figure out a way around that. So, and we do maintain the aircraft to a very high standard. Now, in terms of other bureaucracy, you're exactly right. I mean, once we got past those hurdles, my biggest challenge has not been CASA. We haven't really had any issues since then having to do with that. The biggest challenge that I faced at that point was other bureaucracies. So, for example, we wanted to move our business from Harvey Bay to the Maroochy River. And in order to get permission to operate on the Maroochy River, I needed to get a permit from Maritime Safety Queensland. So they had to look at my procedures and my safety procedures, emergency procedures. Oh, sorry. I get distracted by the things on the screen there. So yes, Andrew Geller, I completely agree with you. Unfortunately, it's not funny. Not a lot of seaplane operations in Australia. Yeah, you're right. We're completely surrounded. But the reason is because it is an unusual, sort of business. And in trying to get permission, like I said, maritime safety, I had to look at all my procedures, my emergency procedures, my, how we were going to fit in with the other watercrafts, all of these things. Maritime safety on my original permit was able to get through that process 30 days start to finish. And they went, yep, good to go. Council had to give me a permit to put up a marquee to sell flights and to embark and disembark passengers from the riverbank. And it took me over a year to get a temporary trial 3-month permit to see how that was going to go. I was told no at least a half a dozen times. And none of the reasons that I was given made any kind of sense. None of them were based on actual reality. And for the most part, they were not things that council actually had any jurisdiction over, because council does not actually have any jurisdiction over the waterway. Council has jurisdiction over the land, and that's it. So in reality, all council should have been looking at was whether or not it was okay for me to put up a marquee and embark and disembark passengers, end of story. But they were very concerned about how it was all going to work on the river, what was going to happen with air traffic, with all of these things. We finally did
Shawn,
get through the permit
I guess
process.
just to jump in on this point, because there's possibly people that are watching these broadcasts as well that are not, they're not aviators, they're not pilots, they've probably got a passing interest in aviation and listening to what the challenges that we're facing as an industry. And to go back to this issue, that local councils often don't have a very good understanding of aviation in its normal form, but then when to introduce the concepts of operating off waterways, it becomes a real challenge, when in fact it should be quite literally interpreted just the same way as boating is interpreted, because the risks of operating off the water really are no different to a boat operating on the same causeway, are they?
Well, that's not entirely true. The risks of operating a boat on the same waterway are significantly higher, actually. David, did you have a chance to look up those statistics for boating accidents in Queensland?
Oh, I didn't, but yeah, I know.
Okay, well,
I know
the stats that I'm going to give you, are a couple of years old, because I haven't looked these up lately. But every year in Queensland, there are 300 to 400 deaths due to boating accidents, and a large percentage of those are due to collisions between two different boats. In Australia, in the 100 years since seaplanes have been operating here, there have not been any fatalities, 0 fatalities or serious injuries as a result of a collision between a seaplane and another vessel on the water, ever. Not one. So yes, boating is significantly more risky.
And Shawn,
And
can
that's
I
one of
also
the
just
things that's
make the
very
comment, and I
frustrating.
think you need to make the comment here as well, that statistic is a result of the fact that Australian pilots take flying seriously, and contrary to maybe the attitudes of even, unfortunately, the CASA chairman in his last conversation with me about private pilots being dangerous, it's actually not true. Private pilots take flying quite seriously, and I do believe, and what I see in all of my travels across the country is that private pilots take pride in participating in the industry, and they take pride in flying. And I think that it does show through clearly that on the whole, our system is actually very, very safe.
Well,
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I definitely think it is.
A private
David?
pilot.
Sorry, David.
Sorry, first of all, a private pilot's got a big investment in his aircraft. So the last thing he wants to do is turn it into a ball of mess. So, it just makes common sense to look after it. We go back to the boating thing. You can have a boating accident, and I think they found most boating accidents were, there was an alcohol contributor to it. Well, flying a plane, it's a 0%. Well, it's a 0% to legally fly a plane. You have to have a nil alcohol limit to fly a plane, and then you'd be very lucky to ever find a pilot that would have a drink, unless you're watching one of the movies, of course, that would drink while flying a plane, or even think of consuming alcohol. So there's that that safety aspect of it as well. And a lot of people don't understand, when you're flying a plane and coming into land, you've got a very good view of all the traffic, where the traffic's going, and I've never ever had a problem landing a plane or taking off a plane on the water with it in a crowded waterway. Not that we normally like to try and find a crowded waterway to land, but we always actually find, getting on that, just that side track thing, we quite often like to land where there is somebody around. So if anything does go wrong, we've got a vessel or somebody that can help us out. So,
well, a great demonstration, David, of what I would call high congestion, high frequency seaplane operations is really Sydney Harbour. I mean, we've got a Sydney Harbour seaplane operator, and I'm involved in sailboat racing and sailing, and we quite often sail right across the causeway where these aircraft are landing and they're taking off. And the funny thing is, as boaters, as soon as we see the aircraft, we give them a wide berth. And you see it happen on the harbour. You see boats naturally get out of the way because they see an aircraft, and there's a natural understanding that you don't want to put your boat in front of an aeroplane. It just doesn't make sense.
Aeroplane hasn't got any.
And that is appreciated, but actually, sorry, David, go ahead.
Yeah, aircraft has no more rules or regulations than a boat. So theoretically, there are different rules from different state to state, which is a bit bizarre. It'd be nice if it was one rule for all the states, but they do differ slightly. But as a seaplane operator, we don't want people going out of their way to miss us, or we will just fit in with them. We're just like a normal. And when we touch the water, we basically are turned into a boat by most marine law.
Shawn?
That's right. And David's exactly right. Although we certainly do appreciate if you give us some open space. Seaplanes, by law, on the overall hierarchy of right-of-way on the water, seaplanes are at the bottom. So it's our job to fit in with the rest of the vessels on the surface. And realistically, the best thing that boaters can do to help us is to maintain heading and speed, because we've already looked at the whole situation. We've already got a plan in our mind as far as how this is all going to work, where we're going to put the airplane, and how we're going to fit into the traffic. So the thing that causes me to go around 95-98% of the time is if a vessel changes what they're doing. And that's another important thing to point out, is that we are able to go around as we come into land. Right until we touch down on the water, we're able to just add power, pull up, go around, and come back and try again. None of us put ourselves in a position where we have to be able to, where everything has to work perfectly. We always assume that we're going to have to go around, that we're going to have to work around these vessels. And the same thing for takeoff. We can actually vary our path on takeoff to go around the vessels on the surface.
So I'm going to drag us back to working with councils, and again, just cognizant of everyone's time this evening. As I've said, that obviously when you introduce things like seaplanes, councils and councillors, I've been involved in many of these conversations with you, Shawn, and also conversations with other businesses at Port Macquarie, as an example. Councils tend to develop a fear. It's like an automatic fear. As soon as you mention, I'm going to operate a seaplane, it's like this kind of sense of disaster seems to just overcome a councillor and councils. I mean, did you experience that in Queensland?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we are in the process of trying to get permission to open a second base at the Pillarstone Passage. Oh, there we go. Stats.
Andrew's just got those statistics.
He's saying Queensland 2019. Good on you, Andrew. 332 incidents, 109 injuries, and 18 fatalities in boating. So again, this is what we're talking about. Boating is significantly more dangerous than seaplanes. But so we are in the process of trying to get permission to operate on the Pumice Passage in Caloundra. In order to do that, I need to have a permit from Maritime Safety. I have to have a permit from Department of Environment and Science, which is basically Parks and Wildlife, and a permit from Council. Now, one of the biggest frustrations has been that none of those agencies wants to issue a permit until the other agencies issue one. So in other words, Maritime Safety doesn't want to issue a permit until Council says okay. Council doesn't want to issue a permit until Maritime Safety says okay. DES doesn't want to issue a permit until the other two agencies say okay. So I was able to Sue Cody King at Maritime Safety has been fantastic, and she actually put together a roundtable with the 3 different agencies and me, and we were able to sit down at the table and come up with a plan that everybody was happy with to be able to move forward. And this was just before COVID hit. And then since then, things have sort of gone sideways a little bit. We've had an election for council. We've got new councilors, and the councilor that's responsible for that area is brand new in the position. And he is very, very he's very concerned. He wants to make sure that he is taking on board the concerns of his constituency, which is fair enough. One of the groups that he wants me to get permission from, support from, is Take Action Pumice Passage, which is a citizens group who is focused on trying to make sure that the Pumice Passage is preserved and protected, which is really good. And I did meet with this group, and we talked about the fact that seaplanes are in fact the most environmentally friendly way to be on a waterway, aside from probably a canoe or a kayak. In other words, we've got no propellers, no propulsion system in the water. We've got no exhaust going into the water. We've got no oil going into the water. And we're only on the surface for a very short period of time, whereas a boat obviously is on the surface the entire time. So we talked about that. We talked about the fact that my particular airplane is incredibly quiet because noise was one of their concerns. Another one of their concerns was shorebirds. We talked about the fact that shorebirds actually congregate underneath flight paths, and that there's a reason for that, which is that shorebirds, obviously one of their biggest concerns in life is being eaten by predators, one of the biggest predators being hawks. And hawks, when they're hunting, typically are about 200 to 300, maybe 400 feet above ground level, which is just about the same altitude that the airplanes are going through over these shorebird sites. And because, as I'm sure both of you guys realize, hawks do not like airplanes. The airplanes going over these sites actually are being protective of the shorebirds because it's scaring the hawks away. And that's why these shorebirds are actually roosting under the flight paths. So we talked about all of these things, and in the end, what they said to me was, well, that's all very well and good, but it's just not a good look for us to support a seaplane. So we are not going to be able to support this because it would not be a good look for us to be supportive of this. So this is the type of thing that really frustrates me, because I have a councilor that has stated that he is not going to support my application unless I can get the support of the citizens group. The citizens group has stated that they're not going to support my application because it wouldn't be a good look. They're duplicating the efforts of DES. DES has actual scientists and experts that work for DES who have looked at the shorebird roosting site and have said, yes, we can work around this and we can see how we can make this work. And then the final thing is, what we're actually looking for is a trial permit. And I've tried to explain this, that, I can understand that you've got concerns. I appreciate those concerns. Let's do a trial permit for 3 months and let's see if those concerns are valid. And if any of those concerns turn out to be valid, we'll see if there's a way to mitigate them. If there isn't a way to mitigate them, then fair enough, I'll go away and leave it alone. But let's make decisions based on facts and not fear.
All right, so there's a fair bit to unpack in that one, and my first set of questions I'd like to throw to David in this, and that is, David, there appears that there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done, not only in Queensland, but with each state and territory here in Australia, to build a greater awareness of the compatibility of seaplane operations and boating waterways right across Australia. I mean, it seems to me that this is something that's going to require a national effort from not only the Seaplane Pilots Association, but also AOPA and the other industry bodies to try and create some kind of national framework so that we can open up these waterways and cut this red tape.
Yes, 100% correct there. The association's been very quiet for the last few years. You know, we've been just, well, I guess, on cruise control, but we've got a new committee now. We've got the commercial guys on board. They've all got a position on board. We've got Chad Banfield, who is heading up our waterways and parks officer. Oh, I'm not supposed to call him an officer, but he's full steam ahead on this. But we do need some help. We're a little bit green, especially myself. I like to, as you probably noticed, I'm not probably the sharpest tool in the shed, but I like to surround myself with sharp tools. So
I've been told I'm the bluntest one available for AOPA.
But
the sledgehammer.
In my business life, I always employ the best people, and it's the same thing at the moment. I think we've got some of the best people on our committee at the moment, which I've just got to get them a little bit more motivated into getting. The problem with committees, and this is something that I see that you guys have addressed, is that having a committee of all volunteers, you can ask them to do something, but you can't tell them to do something. So one of my goals in the Seaplane Pilots Association is to employ somebody just part-time to sort of tick some of these goals off, get in contact with the politicians and the people we need to get in contact with to sit down and talk about and discuss. We have had this issue with the Moreton Bay Marine Park. We got to sit down with the minister once and he agreed with everything we said. He said he's going to rescind the permit for private operations to require a permit. And unfortunately, we then had a change of government. The new government coming in decided against it, which was very disappointing. We should have had a much better handle on this. And if we would have had somebody pay or somebody in a paid position, we could have probably got a little bit more traction where we opened the champagne a little bit too early on that particular cause. But one of the problems that we have is that when we're, you know, when say, I'll use the Moreton Bay Marine Park as a template for this discussion, is that they supply us with a free permit for a recreational or a private operator to operate in the Moreton Bay Marine Park, which is fine. But as soon as that permit is exercised, we have a lot of requirements. One of the requirements is $20 million public liability insurance. So that adds around about $700 to $1,200 to your insurance policy each year to go up from your $5 million, which is pretty well standard on most aircraft, to a $20 million public liability insurance. So there are places, there's in Sydney, Bankstown, to land there, you're supposed to have $20 million public liability insurance, but I don't think they police it, because I know there'd be a lot of operators flying in there without $20 million public liability insurance. But at the moment, to get a marine park permit for Moreton Bay, you have to show them your insurance policy stating that you've got $20 million public liability insurance. And these are, you know, like somebody with a jet ski, a private jet ski or a boat, they don't have to have that public liability insurance to go out and enjoy the Moreton Bay Marine Park. Moreton Bay Marine Park isn't this little tiny bit of waterways just in front of the Brisbane River. It extends from the Gold Coast Spit all the way up to Caloundra and encompasses all the islands in between. So it's a huge waterway, and it is something that's, you know, right at the top of my list of, you know, issues that we've got to solve in the Seaplane Pilots Association. And the other thing too is that if that continues, other councils and will, say that these private operators have got to, get these $20 million public liability insurance, which is just ridiculous.
Well, David, one of the things that I think is clearly understood now, and we've been certainly driving this message for some time, we as an industry need to be working together.
Yes.
The association bodies must come to the realisation that right now we need to be sitting shoulder to shoulder, not only on the high-level regulatory reform agenda, but also on the issues of access, issues of insurance, and all of the small items of bureaucratic minutiae that we're dealing with. We've got to be working together. And so what I would say to you, and my boss is here, so he'd be appreciative of me saying this, is that AOPA Australia is more than willing, and we are quite open to working side by side with the SPAA on these particular issues that you've raised tonight. And I really do feel that there is a great opportunity with the increased visibility through what we're doing with these interviews, and also the work that we've done in the last 4.5 years to build very strong relationships with the federal Senate, and also the strong relationships that we now have with many of the state governments, to bring in organisations like yourselves and to start having a conversation about setting up frameworks that can ensure that seaplane pilots get access to more waterways, landing and takeoff sites, so that we can improve the industry. Because after all, Shawn's business is a great example of what seaplanes and seaplane pilots bring to the general aviation industry. It creates a great tourism business. It's a tourism enterprise. It's given thousands of people, Shawn, an amazing experience to see the Sunshine Coast from an entirely different perspective. Having spent some time with you, the opportunity to work through some of the products that you are bringing to market and the environmental focus that you bring to those products, it shows just how diverse and how broad the interest of aviation is and the value it adds to the broader economy. So we'd be more than happy to work with you, David.
Ben, just something I'd like to bring up too, before I forget, and I'm good at forgetting things, is that one of the association's goal is to improve the training facilities and the ability to find a pilot that is got the ability to train and endorse a seaplane pilot. A seaplane pilot needs to do approximately a 2 to 3 day course, which is classroom as well as hands-on flying, before you're endorsed to have a seaplane license. And there are very few people around that can do that now. And one of the important things, and this was blatantly obvious just recently with all the fires, all the bushfires we had, you've got people out there flying seaplanes, firebombing and all that sort of stuff. These pilots that are flying those things, they would have become PPL, they were students, PPL pilots, then commercial pilots, and then they move on to water endorsements and stuff like that, so they can fly these planes. If we haven't got anywhere to land, if we keep on getting our waterways restricted, we're not going to be able to train people to fly seaplanes. So it's a really important thing, and I hope some viewers out there, I'm hoping we might get some feedback from the show, people that can help us out with getting in contact with councils and politicians that will be on our side, because not to mention the tourism, there's the firefighting, there's air sea rescue, all those sort of things. The Seaplane Pilots Association has taken part of search and rescues from time to time. We're always open there for marine studies, flying over water. We see dugongs. We've got a lot of guys out there that want to help out. When we flew around Australia doing our Round Australia flight, it wasn't just a junket. We did Make-A-Wish flights for kids, which is one of the most rewarding things. One of the most rewarding things in a pilot's career is getting their seaplane license. It is a pinnacle of a lot of pilots' goals in life, and I've spoken to a lot of commercial pilots that they said to me that the pinnacle thing was getting their seaplane pilot license. It just opened up a whole new world to them. But doing the Make-A-Wish flights were one of the most rewarding things I think I've ever done. And it's just that sort of thing is what we can do, but we can't do it if we haven't got anywhere to land. So I'm really hoping some viewers, and I'm hoping as the SPAA, the Seaplane Pilots Association, can get involved with all the other organisations in Australia and perhaps sit down at a round table and see if we can nut out a plan to improve the possibility of getting a couple of these areas like Somerset Dam, Moreton Bay, opening
Absolutely.
back up.
Absolutely. Well, David, I know I definitely can speak on behalf of our Australian General Aviation Alliance partners in saying that we would thoroughly welcome the Seaplane Pilots Association to be actively involved through that framework. And I know Shawn and I, we are more than happy to try and take on some of these issues. One of the ways that we've approached these challenges with respect to access is, is if we look at what we're doing with the Bush Pilots Advocacy Panel that we formed. Bush pilots are facing a very similar challenge in that they would like to be able to land on beaches. They'd like to be able to land in certain areas of state forest. We've got a lot of helicopter pilots have approached AOPA and said, look, what could AOPA do to help us? We'd like to be able to take our helicopters into some of these national parks and land next to rivers where, people can go for picnics and enjoy the national parks. And let's face it, I mean, our aircraft, our seaplanes, our bush planes, our helicopters, are they not simply a Toyota Hilux or a Toyota Land Cruiser that flies? It is a utility. We look at Canada and we look at Alaska and these places, we can see the genuine utility of aviation and what it opens up. So we've put together these advocacy panels, and the idea of those panels is to try and provide a structured approach to engaging with the politicians to get positive outcomes. And we are working successfully through that. So David, I'll spend some time with you after this, and Shawn, I'll harangue you into that as well. And we'll see what we can do, focusing on some of we'll call it the low hanging fruit, the things that we think we could really get done quickly. We might take a look at that and see if we can't make that all happen. Shawn, I want to throw it back to you and get it back to the conversation about dealing with councils. I mean, obviously, the challenge in this is finding a pathway. And at one stage, you and I had quite a lengthy conversation about dealing with maritime. And just about all of the conversations, what it came down to is education, that there appeared to be very little support from the government within these organisations to understand how aviation contributes to their particular portfolios or areas of interest. And that became a real impediment and a roadblock to moving your situation forward.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is that we did, under the previous council before the election, we were invited to come down and do a demonstration takeoff and landing on the Pumice Passage, which we did. And the reaction that we got from the people there in Caloundra was overwhelmingly positive. We had people coming out of everywhere to have a look at the airplane and take pictures of it and ask questions about it. And we didn't have a single person that showed up and crossed their arms and went, what the hell is he doing here? Every single person that came out was really excited to see the airplane. So, again, this is probably the biggest frustration for me is that decisions are being made based on fear and ignorance, and rather than taking whatever steps is necessary to obtain the facts and make decisions based on fact. And if we could get decisions based on fact, we would solve the majority of these problems, because as we said earlier, the seaplanes are incredibly environmentally friendly. They are significantly safer than the boats that are already out there on the waterways. There's no justification for requiring $20 million liability insurance from a private seaplane operator any more than there would be from a boat operator or a jet ski operator. So
obviously this has held the business up, Shawn. Obviously this has held the business up. What does it cost? I mean, we often, when I sit in front of the Senate inquiries and I try to convey to the government that there is an opportunity cost to this bureaucracy.
Yep.
That the fact that it slows our business communities down, the fact that it stops aviation from expanding and taking advantage of opportunity. And one of the big areas that I talk about is the fact that the weight of the regulatory system and the bureaucracy that we face, it removes our ability to respond rapidly to economic opportunity. And so your business is a fantastic example of that, in which the tourism markets wait for no one. They're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. You need to be able to expand and adapt fluidly to take advantage of those economic waves, so that you can create those additional profits, so that you can upskill with staff, that you can expand with aircraft, you can improve your business, you can become more productive with marketing. I mean, how do you see the opportunity cost, not only on your own business, but the broader industry?
Well, I don't know necessarily how to calculate it for the broader industry, but what I can tell you is that our average flight our most popular flight is $450. So if we were to add, if we only did 8 additional flights per week, that's 8 times 450, that's $3,600 a week in gross revenue that we are missing out on, and have missed out. Let's say that we are flying 40 weeks a year. You have to account for weather. So that's $144,000, and we've been at this for almost 2 years. So that's almost $300,000 in lost opportunity.
Jennifer's
And
just
for
put
no
a
reason.
Shawn,
I mean,
Jennifer.
Yep.
I'm going to jump in. Jennifer Douglas has just put a fantastic comment there, and I'll just come back to the three of us on screen for it. Jennifer says, if AOPA and SPAA could work together to ensure that float endorsements are more accessible across Australia, I'm sure more pilots would work on obtaining it. It's certainly on my 5-year plan. David, you got a comment on that?
Yes, well, we're certainly hoping that we'll be able to have more instructors. We've got one of our committee members, Alex, is working on a template for seaplane instruction. We've got several seaplane pilot instructors have given us their training syllabus, and what we've done is we're pulling all the good bits out and putting something so we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. It is something that is very difficult at the moment. There is probably only half a dozen seaplane pilot instructors that I know of that I would recommend for people getting their license. So if you're stuck up in North Queensland,
and David, that's a critical point that you make too, and I'll be careful in making the comment, but it is the case of it's critical to understand who is recommended, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the other thing too is that there's seaplane pilots out there that can give you your endorsement, but you want to make sure you get your endorsement on that same type of aircraft that you're planning to fly. It's no use getting a float plane endorsement if you're going to be flying a floating hull. So for the people out there that don't understand the difference, there's a big difference in seaplanes. There's two types. There's a floating hull, which is like a Catalina, my aircraft, which is a little Sea Ray. When you land, you actually land on the hull of the plane, where in Shawn's case, he has a float plane. So it's a normal aircraft which has had floats put on it like a catamaran. So you've got the 2 floats and then you've got a normal aircraft. With a lot of the seaplanes like mine, they're specifically built to be seaplanes or amphibs. So my aircraft can land on, most floating hull planes are amphibs where they can land on land as well as the water. And it's, there's nothing better. And it's one of the biggest thrills I ever get. And it's actually not flying. It's actually going down a boat ramp in my plane into the water. And you're thinking, what am I doing? Here's this perfectly good plane. And what am I doing? Backing it into the water. It's like, driving your car down the boat ramp. But it is a very nice experience to go down the boat ramp, the plane float, and you haven't forgotten to put the bung in. And,
Let's also. I think I'm correct in saying this, Shawn, that for a private operator, there's no landing fees for landing on a river, is there?
No.
Fantastic.
There shouldn't be, but
fantastic.
There shouldn't be. And David is obviously the one to talk to about that. I'm not doing any private seaplane flying, but with regard to Jennifer's comment, I think that takes me to my other passion, which is independent flight instructors, because one of the biggest issues that we have is lack of independent flight instructors. So if I wanted to be able to do float endorsements, I would have to go to work for a flight school. And I would have to have a flight school that had float endorsements on their manual, on their AOC. I'd have to make sure that we put this type of aircraft on the AOC, and then I would have to convince them that they needed to pay me an amount of money that would make it worth my while to be able to do this. And it doesn't happen. If you want to see more people doing float endorsements, we need to have independent instructors.
Well, look, Shawn, you're definitely going to have a lot more to say on the discussion topic of independent flight instructors, and you are working. I'm going to let a little of the cat out of the bag. You're working on a project at the moment with your AOPA president's hat on, which is going to be a process by which we're going to be demonstrating to the Australian government and the Senate as part of their upcoming Senate inquiry just how difficult and how expensive it is to set up to do flight training in this country, and why the concept of independent flight instructors is really, it is an essential. We need to get this done. The Australian general aviation industry needs independent instructors right across the system for us to kickstart a general aviation economic boom. So there's going to be more on that from you in the coming weeks, isn't there?
Yes, definitely. It is.
He's going, Ben, did you have to say this tonight?
Into this project. I'm quite a ways into this project, and it is mind-boggling trying to work my way through it.
Fantastic. Well, look, gentlemen, we've been an hour underway so far. What we might do is we might just get into some rapid-fire questions, and we'll try and wrap this up over the next 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm very appreciative of everyone making time tonight for the Thursday broadcast. Obviously, we want to see more people get involved in seaplane flying. How do we get young people inspired to want to participate in flying off the water, David? What can we be doing to try and light that flame to get more people interested, young people interested, adults interested, more people saying, I want to get that seaplane endorsement, I want to own a seaplane, and I want to get involved?
Well, the Seaplane Pilots Association, we quite often will go to fly-ins and be, we're representative there. We'll talk to people about, the joys of seaplane flying, and it's just a matter of getting more planes up in the air. I've got a little trivia thing here, which is, it's probably a little bit off the subject of the question you asked, but I wanted to get it out. The very first commercial flight in the world was a seaplane. Back in January the 1st, 1914, it was the very first. It was in Pennsylvania, in Tampa, and it cost the passenger $400 to do the very first commercial flight, which was just over 100 years ago now. So interesting to see that the seaplane was the very first commercial flight ever in the world.
Not a lot of people would know,
David.
Answer
that question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Shawn, jump in.
If I could speak to that question as well, certainly one of the things that I've found to be extremely rewarding is the number of people that are very excited about, become very excited about learning to fly and about seaplanes just because they have the opportunity to see my aircraft. And that's one of the great things about it, is because it's really an aircraft that's sort of out in the wild. It's not corralled in an airport behind a big fence. And so we have so many people that just stop by that just want to see the airplane, want to talk about the airplane. Little kids that want to jump up in there. Whenever we are not flying it, we are quite happy to take the opportunity to let people come and have a look inside the airplane, let kids climb up in it and everything else, because I really do want to sort of spread that seaplane and aircraft infection throughout the world as much as I possibly can.
Absolutely. And look, it is such an exciting thing. And I always get excited when we're out on the boat and we're sailing, or we're just out enjoying being on the water, and you see a seaplane come in and land. I get excited. As an airplane person, I get excited about it. And I'll confess that I actually haven't flown in a seaplane. But I do get
You gotta
excited
come up
every
and go
time I
for a
see them
fly.
operate on and off the water. And so it is an interesting question, and it's a really relevant question, because how do we encourage people to take that next step to get involved? Because obviously what we've discussed tonight is that there's a big opportunity and economic cost to the fact that there are things holding our industry back the whole time. I mean, what type of activities do we need to be getting involved in, and maybe events do we need to be putting together to try and get that thrust, to get beyond that opportunity cost, to drive people into general aviation and to get them more involved with this particular sector of the industry?
Well, I think, just like I said, having to do with my own project. One of the reasons that I've been trying to get this second location is because, in spite of all the advertising that I've done over the years, probably 95% of the people that I talk to, I ask them, how did you find out about us? And they go, oh, we saw the airplane. So what I've found is, if I go around Maroochydore, Mooloolaba, that area, and people see my seaplane ute, or they see my shirt or my jacket or whatever, they go, oh, seaplanes. Are you the guy on the Maroochy River with the military looking? Yeah, that's me. Oh, I see that plane all the time. It's so cool. I want to come down and want to go for a fly. If I go to Caloundra and start talking about seaplanes, which Caloundra is not very far, it's 35-minute drive down the coast. If I go to Caloundra and start talking about seaplanes, people say, there's a seaplane on the Sunshine Coast? Really? So, like I said, in my own little way, just being able to operate in another area is going to expand dramatically the number of people that are interested in seaplanes and interested in aviation. And in David's case, doing it recreationally, if he had the opportunity to just take his plane anywhere you could take a power boat, there would be so many people, and I'm sure you've done the same thing, David. I'm sure you have people that come up to you when you land somewhere and they're fascinated by the airplane. They want to look at it. They think it's amazing. So I think just in terms of expanding the number of places where seaplanes are able to operate, I think that alone is going to make a huge difference in terms of interest in seaplanes and interest in aviation.
I see that question there about Lake Boga.
I'll put it back up for you, David.
Quite every time there's an event out there, we try to get some representation. I've been out there twice, and Lake Boga is a fantastic place. For people that don't know what Lake Boga is, back in the war, it was a secret base where they used to keep and maintain a lot of the seaplanes in the war, mainly the Catalinas, and with also in conjunction with Rathmines base just north of Sydney in Lake Macquarie. Both areas, the Seaplane Pilots Association has a conference biannually, and we've held it at Rathmines for several years. But early next year, we're going to the Rathmines Festival. Doesn't look like it's going ahead this year, so we'll be going up to the Whitsundays to have the conference early in May. I think it'll be. We're just penciled it in at the moment, and hopefully COVID will be all gone by then, and we'll have a good run at the next conference. So if anybody's out there interested in seaplane flying, get in contact with the Seaplane Pilots Association and become a member. It's only $25, and we do have several fly-ins all around Australia. We're hoping to get some in nearly every state, hopefully next year.
And David, again, we should try and find a way that we can become involved with the SPAA on those events and try and bring the AOPA bus along with the flight simulators, and obviously that is a way of attracting some younger interest in these events. And I guess the inverse of this as well is to try and encourage the SPAA to send some of those amphibious planes up to Narromine for the industry's annual AusFly event, and use that as a platform again to try and talk to pilots and aircraft owners who may very well be tempted across to have their feet wet rather than feet dry.
Yeah, absolutely. Barefoot flying.
So, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you both for all of your time. Shawn, we're not going to solve the problems of the excess swamping of bureaucracy against seaplane operators and pilots, but I think a good common theme that we've heard tonight is that there really is a willingness to work together to try and address some of these challenges and these problems. And I think it's also a great opportunity for the industry to see and to hear the industry bodies talking about some of these challenges. And David, we'd love the opportunity to do a few more of these panel discussions with various members, instructors and personalities from within the SPAA, because this, after all, at 7 o'clock at night through to 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, it's a great opportunity to enter the living rooms, not only of our members, but of people not only in Australia, but from around the world that might want to be learning a little bit more about aviation in this country and how they actually get involved. So I'll be putting some invitations across. I know Shawn and David, you know each other quite well. So Shawn, I know you'll be leaning on David saying, come on, let's get some stuff happening. And I'll be looking forward to it.
I think it might be the other way around.
Is it? Okay, so you know. Okay, sorry about that. So David knows Shawn. Fantastic, guys. Well, look, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our viewers who have joined us through this evening, and to each of you who've put questions in. We actually look like we've just got a last question right at the last minute here. From Clancy saying, another great segment, Ben. 2 questions. Has CASA come up since with a recommended method to launch a seaplane from a trailer or dolly? Surely that cannot be a unique requirement without having become a warbird. Second question, similar to the limited qualification instructors, are there any limitations with qualified lamies to do required maintenance? Shawn, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, first question is no, they haven't. So as far as I know, the only way to legally launch a seaplane from a dolly in Australia is to be in warbirds. Second question, limitations on qualified lamies to do the required maintenance. No, pretty much any lamie can go ahead and do the maintenance on the aircraft. It can be a bit of a learning curve for the maintenance organization. That's certainly been what we've found. The maintenance organization that we're using right now at Caloundra is absolutely fantastic. They've got some really talented guys there, and they've been able to solve all of our issues without undue problems.
And if you build your own aircraft, you can actually do your own maintenance.
Exactly.
I'm sure our friends across at the Sport Aircraft Association thank you for the plug. I know Tony White's probably listening right now saying, thank you, David.
That's right.
Both having meetings on at the same time. I've got another screen over here with the SPAA local chapter meeting.
Fantastic. Well, look, David, thank you so much. Shawn, thank you very much again. And we'll be back to our normal Tuesday broadcast next week. In the meantime, if any of our members or industry supporters have questions that they would like to ask about becoming involved in flying seaplanes, whether it be that you would like to get your seaplane endorsements and ratings, you'd like to purchase a seaplane, or just simply would like to start hanging out around seaplane pilots to get into the whole scene, you jump online to the Seaplane Pilots Association of Australia. If you do a quick Google search, just Seaplane Pilots Association of Australia, SPAA, you'll find all of their details. You can also contact AOPA Australia. I encourage you to become members of all your industry bodies and associations, and I know it's expensive to try and be a member of everything, but your industry associations and bodies are fighting really hard for you and your industry, and it's a great way to contribute towards the future success of aviation, to safeguard not only your rights, but to safeguard having an industry that is profitable and functioning, not for just today, but into the next 10, 20, 30 years. So jump online and check that out. Thank you, gentlemen, and we'll see everyone next week.